President Bush this past week made the startling but painfully true observation that an American soldier on duty in the Persian Gulf may have been safer there than on the streets of his hometown. The president might have added, especially if his hometown is Los Angeles. In Operation Desert Storm, fewer than 200 Americans died. In the streets of Los Angeles last year, 690 died in gang wars. There are some 100,000 gang members, homeboys they call themselves, in 850 Los Angeles gangs. And in those wars, there's no ceasefire.
Every day, life in the water.
Going to jail, getting shot, getting stabbed.
3 shots for attack 342.
It is kind of a serious game.
Darkness descends on Los Angeles and the gangs and their guns hit the streets again. Shot in the leg, a gang member runs for his life. Gang members scatter. Another skirmish and the bloody war is over. No one was killed this time, but not for lack of trying. For the past few years, politicians, cops, and gang workers have focused on warring black gangs. But this winter, the deadliest wars are among Hispanic gangs. Police told Expose that Hispanic gangs are killing in record numbers.
Homeboy? What do they call you?
Danny boy.
Actually, this is where the Los Angeles gangs began, dating back to the Zoot Suit Wars of the 1940s.
This is for La Lopez.
Now, there are 50 gangs in 7 square miles of East Los Angeles. In 1990, they accounted for 33 murders. This is Lopez Street in East Los Angeles. It's the heart of Lopez Moravia, a gang that dates back to the 1940s. Generations of young men from this neighborhood following their fathers, even their grandfathers, into the gang.
I grew up on these streets.
You grew up in the gangs in these streets, right?
Yeah, I got into the gang when I was about 11 years old.
Tintin is now 32, a veteran of prison and heroin addiction.
You know, somebody else is going to get hit.
He followed his parents, his uncles, and his cousins in the gang.
Hey, what's up, man?
And earned a reputation as a pistolero, a shooter.
The revolution's over.
Now, Tintin works for the State Gang Violence Reduction Project, trying to stop the killing. As a veterano or veteran, he can make the Lopez homeboys listen.
When is it going to stop, eh? How many more homeboys are going to have to die? How many more kids are going to have to get shot? They look at themselves as soldiers of their communities, their neighborhoods. They're like the policemen of their neighborhoods. You know, that's why most Hispanic gangs, I mean, their wars are territorial-wise. A lot of times, you know, gang members will deal drugs in order to raise enough money to buy guns.
How old are the kids who are doing the shooting these days?
They start from about 11 to...
11?
Yeah, they start pretty young.
The ties that bind the homeboys are very strong. What do you need that they can give you?
A lot of things, like, you know, they love me because I'm one of the homeboys and I do too.
They like having older brothers?
Yeah.
Like a family?
Mm-hmm.
Like a father?
They're my family.
Yeah? You have a father at home?
Big brother, man.
What happened here? That's not a appendicitis.
Oh, no, it's a bullet wound. It's got a shot.
You must have almost died.
Yeah.
Taking care of business. Retaliation. That's the name of this deadly game. 14-year-old Marcos was the 11th victim of Lopez's war with a rival gang. Marcos was only in Lopez a month when a rival gang roared by, guns blazing. Another drive-by killing.
Sheriff's Department, open the door, we have a warrant!
Days later, a pre-dawn raid. The L.A. County Sheriff's Gang Unit arrests a 17-year-old for the murder.
Turn this way.
The boy's mother simply would not believe that he was in a gang, despite plenty of evidence. Joker was fingered by a Lopez homeboy who witnessed the shooting. But Joker was released when the Lopez gang member recanted his story. He had broken the code of the street. Don't get the police involved. Take care of it yourself.
Well, they figure they have a better chance of getting at that guy with him out on the streets than in jail, you know, because they know he's going to get, life. If he gets life, they don't want that. They want him dead.
That's what the payback is. Take one of us, we're gonna take 3 of you.
Boo Boo's mother, fearing for his life, moved her boys out of the neighborhood. But the lure of the gang life was so strong, Boo Boo came back to visit, and he got shot.
They just came up this way right here when I was walking into the yard, and they just opened up. There's no other way to put it. They just drove up like this, slowed down a little, and pa 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 pa.
Boo Boo's life still revolves around the neighborhood, but he has forbidden his brothers from joining. They, in turn, are afraid for him.
I always worry when he comes there because he could get shot again and he could die.
I don't like to think about dying, but I love the neighborhood, so I'm gonna stick by it.
For gang members, that's it. The neighborhood and homeboys and a twisted sense of pride that triggers violence and death.
They buried the other homeboy today, the other guy.
The day before that youngster got cueteated and got killed, that's when they hit that water in the hole.
Yeah,
The day
the day before.
Gun is in rear waistband.
Sergeant Joe Guzman, born and raised on these streets, has worked gangs for 12 years.
It's gotten to the point where it's literally out of hand.
Why has it become so violent again?
Well, number one, because there's a lot more gangs than there were in the recent past.
Does that have a lot to do with illegal immigration?
Yeah, in the last 10 years, we've seen an influx of immigrants from Central and South America into the United States, and particularly in Southern California. And that becomes a perfect recruiting group for a lot of the traditional gangs.
The gangs and their recruits have turned all of East Los Angeles into a war zone.
Let me see your hands.
The fighting spills from the streets into the stores. A gang shooting played out on a surveillance camera at a liquor store. The target gang member was hit in the side, but he didn't even go to the hospital.
Shots fired. Deputy involved in the shooting. They're exchanging gunfire with the suspects.
Come pursuit of the vehicle.
Holy Toledo.
Sheriff deputies surprised gang members in the middle of a drive-by shooting. A running gun battle followed. The deputies after the gang members.
They're shooting and shooting. Boom, 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 boom. Back to back. Boom.
The gang car hit a patrol car and flipped. The driver and the shooter died. Another gang member was shot twice in the head.
I just saw the dude all of a sudden lean out and just start busting. And then he busted us, so we bust back.
A deputy dislocated his shoulder. 3 other gang members were arrested.
Houston, 128 out of altitude, 28 out of
And then another funeral. Another funeral where families, homeboys, and Father Greg Boyle would mourn.
In my 5 years here, I buried 14 kids, and 10 just in 1990, and 3 just in this past week.
Father Boyle, with all the violence that comes with being a member of a gang, why do the youngsters in these neighborhoods continue to join up?
Well, I mean, part of the issue here is that gang activity and gang membership is such a thoroughly complex thing, you know. They're sort of a symptom of a lot of root problems like poverty and dysfunctional families and joblessness and failure of schools and despair, boredom. As long as those conditions out of which grow gangs exist, we're always going to have kids joining up gangs.
Father Greg is a priest of the streets in the community surrounding Dolores Mission, a community that includes 11 different gangs. When gangs claim a victim, Father Greg is often the first one called, even before police. When you talk to them about the futility of retaliation, do they hear that at all?
The other night, I heard gunshots. I went out on my bike. I went over to where I thought the gunshots were coming from, and sure enough, there was a whole crowd of kids from one neighborhood, and they had been fired upon by a car, and they were preparing themselves to retaliate. They were all packing. They all had guns.
Right.
I went up to one kid and I said, you know, you don't want to do this. And the first thing that came out of his mouth was, you know, why not? You know, I have nothing to live for. I mean, hundreds of kids have told me that before. That, for me, is the hardest obstacle in all this. I mean, you can open a school, you can find a job, but to kind of redirect kids, give them hope, fill them with hope, is the tallest order there is.
But if you get shot, you could
Too
die.
bad. You get shot and die, you're too bad.
But you're 14 years old, your whole life is ahead of you. 14 years old and ready to die.